Christmas and unmet expectations often go hand in hand. I frequently read Laura Dolce's, I don't know how to say it. Is that the right way? Dolce? I oftentimes read her column in the Co-Star, and specifically, this is how she began her article of last week. I will not get everything done before Christmas. Further, my holidays will not resemble the picture-perfect warm and fuzzy ones celebrated on the Hallmark Channel, no matter how many movies I watch. She speaks for many. On Thursday morning, for example, I guarantee that the gift opening experience will not be one of unilateral happiness. Someone will buy a loved one a purple sweater. And the recipient will be thinking, why'd you buy me purple? He knows I hate purple. Someone else will buy something for a woman in a size or two that's a little larger than necessary. That's not a good move. But Christmas is not, and never has been, about perfection. A while back, the chief let me know about a couple who went Christmas shopping at the mall. They had separate errands to run, so they decided to meet at a designated spot. But the husband did not show up when he was supposed to. His wife waited and waited and waited until finally she called him on her cell. Well, where are you? I've been waiting here for 20 minutes. In a very calm voice, he said, honey, do you remember the jewelry store where we went before we were married? It had that diamond necklace you wanted, but I couldn't afford then. The wife got choked up and started to cry. And she said, yes, I remember that jewelry store. Well, he said, I'm right next door at the Home Depot. Christmas, unmet expectations. But the message of Christmas is that it doesn't require perfection in order to happen. Never has, and it never will. The tree can have a huge bare space, which no decorations can fill. We put up our tree last night and marveled, the three of us marveled. We thought, I've never seen a stranger tree in my life. How can trees grow like this? I thought it was impossible. But we love it. And if you want to see, you can come by and we'll show it to you and you'll agree with us. The kids and the in-laws don't all have to be present, nor do the grandchildren. And maybe someone you loved more than life itself is not going to be here anymore. Bottom line, perhaps due to your circumstances this year, you're not very happy right now. But that doesn't mean you need to skip Christmas and wait for another year. On the contrary. Despite what popular songs might lead us to believe, feeling merry is not a prerequisite for Christmas joy. An overall state of well-being certainly wasn't essential for the first Christmas to take place. Listen to the opening words in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verse 5. In the days of King Herod of Judea. Right away, those words tell us that this was not a happy time in the history of Israel. Herod was a despot. Not only that, he was a murderer who didn't mind making even family members lie in their own cold blood. Nationally, it was not a happy time, nor was it for Israel's citizens. 2 weeks ago, I preached on Mary's predicament, and last week, Guy Freeman gave a riveting portrait of Joseph's state of mind. No, their circumstances were certainly far from perfect, yet it was precisely then that God, in the very midst of their misery, gave the deepest joy that a soul can contain. God did not wait for times to get better. God did not wait for the right set of circumstances. God chose to give glory in the darkness. Joy, right then and right there. What's interesting about joy is that most people think of it as an extension of happiness. In other words, joy is simply happiness at its highest level. But that's not it. And someone summarized the difference in this way. He said, happiness is human. It's based on a personal reaction to favorable situations. It's what we experience when life is turning out the way it should. But when our fortunes reverse and bad things happen, then so goes our happiness out the window. But in contrast, joy is divine. And by virtue of that fact, because joy is divine, it is always available to us, no matter what our circumstances. In other words, we have happiness because of favorable situations. But we can have joy in spite of them. Joy can come to us whenever we accept God's invitation to reflect and first accept Christ's light. Barbara Johnson is a Christian humorist a la Irma Bombach, and she writes books with titles like Splashes of Joy in the Cesspools of Life. And she's well qualified to do that because her life has been unusually challenging. At one time, her husband lay on the side of a road after a brutal car accident. He had had severe brain damage, and at that time, the doctors predicted that he would be a vegetable for the rest of his life. Her oldest son was traveling by car back from Alaska when he was hit and killed by a drunk driver. Her second son was killed in Vietnam. And her response to all that tragedy was to write this: sometimes I meet people who think I'm a little too joyful, that I'm ducking reality and ignoring the painful facts of life. But I simply tell them that I'm not ignoring the facts. Yes, pain is inevitable, but misery is optional. We always have a choice between misery and joy. Someone defined joy, and I like this definition, as simply this: joy is the evidence that we have personally received God's love. It is the acknowledgement of Christ's Spirit within us, and it surfaces whenever we are willing to share that presence with someone else. It has nothing to do with what's going on around us, but it has everything to do with Him who has chosen to dwell within us. And our job, our challenge, is to say yes to being its transmitters. Years ago, a lighthouse keeper died, and it fell to his wife to be the keeper of the light. And she wrote in her journal, "Every evening I would look across the troubled waters and the crashing breakers, and out of the blackness of the darkest sea, I would hear my husband's voice saying to me, 'Mind the light, mind the light.'" Jesus says the same to us. How easy it is to allow ourselves to become simply observers of the dark, especially when there's a lot of dark to see. Yet our faith calls us to do more than that. It calls us to mind His light. Last Friday night's wonderful concert of Christmas jazz concluded with the song, "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." And I'd like to end by talking about that same song. For those of you too young to remember, it was originally sung in the musical Meet me in St. Louis. Judy Garland was singing to her 5-year-old sister, and she was bemoaning the fate of her family and having to move far away to New York City. But in 1957, Frank Sinatra discovered the song and decided that he wanted to include it in a new album that he was naming A Jolly Christmas. But given the song's lyrics, until then we'll have to muddle through somehow, he asked the composer, Hugh Martin, and I quote, "Do you think you could jolly up that line for me?" And so he did. Martin changed the line to sing, "Hang a shining star upon the highest bough." And so it's been ever since. Through the years, we will all be together. We all will be together. Sorry, Jennifer. If the fates allow. Not until then, we'll have to muddle through somehow. But instead, and what a difference it made, hang a shining star upon the highest bough. No matter where you are, no matter how dark the night. And that is the Christmas message of joy for us. The good news of Christmas is that even in the darkest night, there is no place that God will not go. There is no will not enter. He comes to us regardless of where we are or of any situation we might be in. He comes into our lives so that we can become more like him. And what we have to do is to allow him room. I was going to say simply, but it's not simple. What we have to do is to allow him room, to clear him a space, and to make his joy be in us so that our joy may be complete. For in the words of Fra Giovanni, the gloom of the world is but a shadow. Behind it, yet within reach, is joy. There is radiance and glory in the darkness. Could we but see? And to see, we have only to look. Thanks be to God. Amen.